Welcome back to Ask the Planman, where each week, each episode, we bring you all things you want to know about finance, investments, and insurance, but we're afraid to ask. Today, we have attorney Tammy Saltzman down here in Boca Raton, Florida. Tammy is a matrimonial and real estate lawyer and been in practice, we'll just say, for a little bit of time. And welcome to Ask the Planman, Tammy. Great to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I've been trying to get over here for quite some time, so it's nice to finally be here.
Part of the forum that I'm generating here is to bring people information on a variety of aspects when it comes to their finances. I mean, insurance is a piece of it, investments is a piece of it, but their finances, and what I thought would be pertinent having somebody like you on the show is to talk about an arena that I've had to go through, my parents went through. As I said to you briefly before we started, the stats are, an alarming, 50%, I think, still today. And so there is a lot of challenges, especially during COVID, when people were going through separations or COVID leading to more separations because people were stuck home together. But what I'd hope we could have some dialogue today is to really give people a sense of maybe some, not that we're forcing people or we're encouraging them to go get divorced, but if things aren't going down the road the way they had hoped, if they really think that there's a necessity for something. But let's just kind of talk out a little bit. How would you guide your clients in a preemptive state, kind of maybe a go-to list or something? But I got to shut up. You kind of talk a little bit, like how would you take somebody through preparation?
Okay, so first of all, Tammy Saltzman from Boca Raton, Florida. I am a practicing attorney for 23 years here in South Florida area. And so much of what I know has to do with the law in Florida. And you did mention separation. In Florida, we don't recognize separation at all. There is no such thing as legal separation. So you're either married or divorced or going to a divorce. And even though I am a divorce attorney, I will always counsel people that a divorce should be a last resort. So before divorce should be communication, should be maybe taking a separate break from each other, counseling, whether you go to a marital therapist, a family therapist, your own therapist, together to a therapist, or a rabbi or a priest. There are sex counselors out there. There are all kinds of people who can help prevent a divorce, because we all know that in a divorce, you're going to split most of your assets. So half of your marital assets go to one spouse, and half the other marital assets will go to the other. So in the event of a divorce and you've tried everything and now you are planning to get divorced, there are a lot of things that you can do in order to prepare. So the first thing you're going to do is know what your assets are. A lot of times one person is taking care of the bills. And so that other spouse may not be fully aware of all the bank accounts, all the investment accounts, all of the debts of the family. A lot of times, one spouse, and, when I was married, I was the one who took care of it all. Quite often it is the husband who takes care of it all. And, papers are put in front of you here, sign here, sign here, sign here. And a lot of times you don't even know what you're signing, or you don't even know where the papers are that you signed. So it's quite important to know your assets and your debts. And we fill out what's called a financial affidavit in the beginning of a case. And it's used to go to temporary relief. And it's also used on the last day of trial or the first day of trial, because it's a very important document that lays out what you know about. And quite often, you don't always put everything you know about down, and that can come back to hurt you later.
Oops,
right?
Did I forget about that Cayman Island account?
Exactly. So
let me, if I may. So you mentioned Florida before and being a non-separation state. So I'm from New Jersey, got divorced up in New Jersey, and I'm certainly hopefully going to have a lot of my friends listening up in New Jersey. New Jersey had that 18-month separation where, conjugal or otherwise, once you're breaking up with that spouse, the clock starts. If somewhere in the middle, 3 months down the road, you got a night of weakness and had a conjugal visit, your clock is starting all over again. So New Jersey does work differently than Florida in that sense. So I just want to kind of put that in as a so what, right? To other states have different clocks or measurement tools where you're saying Florida doesn't recognize any of that. So,
and I can only speak to Florida because I'm not licensed in any other state. And I know that in New York, it's a 12-month waiting period before you can file for divorce. And some states, you pay child support until your child is 21. Here, it's 18. So different rules do apply to different states, but planning for divorce is the same no matter what. So you're still going to want to know what your assets and your debts are. You're still going to want to watch when the mail comes in and maybe make copies of things or go through files and make photocopies. You're entitled to copies of everything. And especially on accounts that is jointly held by both spouses. You can go to any bank. If you know that you bank at Bank of America and your name is on the bank account, you can go to Bank of America and say, can you please give me copies of all my bank statements for the last year? And they'll give them to you. And then in really severe cases where we don't trust the other spouse or one spouse really doesn't know anything, we can do searches with private investigation services that will do asset checks. And it's based on social security numbers and also corporate ID numbers. So the first thing we'll do is check all of the states for different corporations that could be owned by a spouse. So there are a lot of different ways that we search assets. And then, of course, we have to value the assets. That also sometimes causes issues, and we may need appraisals on property. We may need appraisals on artwork or jewelry. We may need a forensic accountant to come in and value a business or to value a special type of holding. Different assets generate different types of income. Some are taxable, some are not taxable. So we can just keep unpeeling the layers of the onion. And the most important thing is to know that in the end, most of your assets will be accounted for one way or the other. And that is what most of the divorce is about. So divorce covers parenting issues and in the, who sees the kids and when, covers equitable distribution, which is going to cover the assets and the debts and even contingent assets and debts. And then you're going to move right into alimony. And alimony is based on, in Florida, need and ability to pay and how many years you're married. And then child support. And so...
Sounds like a lot of stuff.
Yeah. And then, on the other end of, that is... when you are awarded something, say you are going to get alimony or you are going to get child support or you are going to get the marital home or something like that, you may want to also ask and provide for insurance so that if, God forbid, something happens to the spouse who's paying, the spouse that's receiving will have supplemental income to rely upon when that other spouse is, and it could even be a disability. So you may need even disability insurance, and you would be able to speak more to that than me.
Thank you. That's a great throwback to me. So
yes.
What basically, where Tammy and I could be collaborating with clients, and again, similar to what happened is we had 2 children. My ex and I each had policies on the other to protect either the college planning expense or the mortgage, whoever got the house, whatever it was, so that she couldn't change hers and cancel hers and leave me vulnerable. I owned hers and she owned mine. and we were responsible for paying each other's. And as long as we paid it, we had that coverage in place, and that could never change. If she got remarried, that husband can't manipulate that policy to go to him instead, right? So these are some of the techniques or tips that people can take away from some of this. Again, we're not encouraging people to go get divorced, but we are the plan man, and we're talking about planning, right? So let's solidify. Go ahead.
Yeah, so let's talk about that, okay? So there are three main reasons people get divorced, okay? One is money. That's like at the top of the list. And so, a lot of people fight over money. A lot of people fight over long-term care insurance. A lot of people fight over life insurance. Oh, you're insuring your ex-wife, but what about me kind of thing. And so I would like to put out there that the best kind of planning you can do when you're married and fighting over financial issues could be obtaining life insurance and other types of insurances that are available that could put the other spouse at ease, and that could save your marriage. And I do that. So I use what's called a post-nuptial agreement. So there's prenups and postnups, right? So a prenup is something that you put together when you're planning your wedding, that when we get married, this is what we agree to. And usually you're protecting premarital assets, you're maybe waiving alimony. There are things that you would put into a prenup, but with a prenup, you have to have an anticipated date of marriage. In a postnup, you're already married. And so in second marriage especially, which is a higher divorce rate, you're not only fighting over money, and sex is the second thing people fight about, and the third thing they fight about is in-laws. But in a second marriage, quite often now you have to add in the ex-spouse and children from a previous marriage. So there's so much more volatile topics, which is why the percentage goes up. But if you could create a post-nuptial agreement over the things that you're fighting about, and that could, I want to say, extinguish, right? Extinguish the flame that burns when you fight, then maybe you could put this agreement aside like you would a will, knowing that you're protected or your spouse is protecting you, and you would stop worrying about it and stop fighting about it. So maybe we could save some marriages by using these types of tools: postnuptial agreements, life insurance, long-term care insurance. A lot of times a spouse will say, I'm too old to insure you, right? Maybe now he has a heart disease or he had cancer and he can't leave a life insurance policy for his new spouse, but he can get long-term care insurance for her.
Potentially.
Right? To do that.
Potentially. Still got to be insurable for that as well, but it's a different requirement. Yes.
There are other ways. Maybe it's an annuity that's going to pay off an amount. There are other financial ways to plan to make one spouse feel at ease so that maybe they won't get divorced.
Okay. So as a more of a preventative step, if they could see and understand the other side, again, there's a million variables that go into this stuff, ladies and gentlemen. So this is not turnkey, but it's understanding what somebody's challenge is, what is making them upset or afraid in the relationship that they're either seeking to leave, or is there, as you offered up at the beginning of this, is there a way to remedy it with counseling, guidance from somebody spiritual, financial, whatever it is, that says, you know what, he's hiding all the money and I don't know where it is, and I've got $100 a month allowance and I don't want to be here anymore, right?
And I've had that case, and I have been able to solve that case with a postnuptial agreement that says, wife is entitled to this, and wife is going to go back to school. And we come up with plans that make them both feel good and secure so that they don't even want the divorce anymore.
And again, just, to add to the list, you got health insurance decisions, you have social security decisions, on and on and on. It is very layered. Any kind of separation, whether it's a business relationship, but now personal, somebody's in the relationship 30, 40 years, and now they just want out. It's just not a quick remedy.
Those are senior divorces. So those are like, the silver divorces that we do, which are very sad. And, so someone's been married 30 or 40 years and they want a divorce. That's sad. Very sad.
What would you, if you have any kind of statistics, what are the ratios of, let's say, an over 60 versus an under 60? Do you have any kind of numbers?
I don't have numbers. My niche is 10 hours or less. So I get a lot of people that don't want to fight. I get people that want to save their marital assets to invest and use it to plan. So a lot of people will start a divorce with, say, $1 million in the bank. And they're married and they feel like, okay, we have $1 million. We saved $1 million, right? And that's a nice size amount of money. And even if we get divorced, we're going to split it 500 and 500. And that, it's not bad. But the thing that the parties don't understand is that, lawyers earn their living by taking your assets and litigating until those assets are depleted, and then they withdraw from the case. So that's your typical thing that happens, especially to the spouse that's not educated or not in the know or is extremely angry, right? Divorce attorneys love really angry people because they're willing to spend every penny for revenge. And there is no revenge in court, not in Florida anyway. This is a no-fault state. So the courts don't punish spouses for infidelity or for gambling or for pornography or from abandoning the home. So you don't really want to focus on those things. And, we can go around and around in circles on this, but
so when you say 10 hours or less, you're talking more of a mediation type of format versus like going to court and suing each other and fighting.
I'm talking an uncontested divorce. And an uncontested divorce could include mediation. So like I said, there's 4 main issues: parenting, equitable distribution, alimony, and child support. So if you're going to fight, each one is going to cost you between $5,000 and $20,000, depending on how much you want to fight about it. And it could cost more. I've seen people spend hundreds of thousands of dollars fighting over a dog, so it all depends on how angry you are and the kind of lawyer that you find, right? So I'm the kind of lawyer, when you come in to see me, I'm like, let's try to settle this as quickly as possible. If you and your spouse are in agreement, we can get this done in 10 hours or less. That's going to cost you less than $5,000. And how great is that? And then you're not depleting your $1 million. You really are walking away with $490,000, right? So you want to be careful, because a lot of people, when they get divorced, they're thinking with their heart instead of with their brain. It's like a business decision, and it needs to
inevitably somebody's scorned. Somebody's upset. It's not always going to be a mutual decision to go separate ways. So the person who's getting jilted, right, is being asked like for the divorce is now going to be upset. And so it's going to usually lead to screw them. I'm going to fight, and so that hornet is now being released, and they don't want to play nice because they're going to get back at you. And I don't care if, like you said earlier, if I spend every dollar, I'm going to ruin your life now because you've abandoned me. And
that is a divorce lawyer's favorite client. We see them coming from miles away. They hate their spouse. They're willing to spend whatever it takes. I once had a client whose spouse stole her Chanel sunglasses out of her Mercedes. And I told her, just go buy a new pair. $390, go buy a new pair. She must have spent $15,000 trying to get those sunglasses back, and she never got them back. And so I'm the kind of lawyer that said right off the start, just go buy a new pair. Go to Saks, get a new pair. And, but, some people don't listen. So, I guess my best advice to anyone contemplating divorce is be careful of the lawyer that you hire, and remember that the only ones who win in court are lawyers. And the best revenge is walking away and rebuilding your life and being happy. That is the best revenge. So,
No, it 100%. So as you mentioned, let's just kind of recap a few of the pieces. So you've got the financial equity distribution or equitable distribution of the assets, dealing with the income support, whether that's alimony, right? If somebody has a pension and or is making more money on Social Security, then you need to potentially distribute that a little bit, right? If he has $1 million in his 401k and he's got $100,000 pension, well, she's going to be entitled to somewhere equal, but obviously it gets worked out. But half of that 401k should potentially become hers, and getting that revenue, his pension becomes her pension. It's not just his, right?
So depending on the state, in Florida, from the date of marriage till the date of filing, every single thing purchased, regardless of whose name is on it, is marital. So if you bought a property and you just had one person's name on it, it doesn't make it yours. If you have a checking account and it's in your name only, and you've been putting $100 in there every month forever, and your spouse doesn't know about it, it's still marital money. Unless you have a prenuptial agreement or a postnuptial agreement that says, my income is mine and your income is yours. Or your assets are yours and my assets are mine. All income and all assets are up for grabs, including inherited money.
I was about to ask that question. Okay. So you're living in Florida. There's a lot of seniors down here, right? So you've got generational transition of money, right? South Florida's God's waiting room. So we've got plenty of people that are turning over. And now I'm inheriting that. So if somebody's inheriting, it doesn't matter how much it is, 100,000, 500,000.
Or a condo,
piece of property, a car. So
non-marital. Non-marital property.
So an inheritance is outside of that she could put that away and say, that was from my parents, that condo in Boca, and he can't get at that asset. Now, if she eventually sells it and commingles those assets, or is it always
marital? Once you commingle, marital. Once you put the spouse's name on the deed, marital. Once you start withdrawing money out to live on, could be considered marital income. So you got to be really careful, and you need to keep it very separate. Now, when we're talking about income for the purposes of alimony and child support, it is income from everywhere, including from an inheritance. So say you were receiving $1,200 a month from an annuity or a trust that you are a beneficiary of that is non-marital, that $1,200 would still be considered income to you every month. So rental income on your pension, income on any stocks or bonds, income, and all of that is income. And sometimes expenses are considered income too. So if you write off your car, if you write off your phone, or you're provided a car or a phone from your employer, that would be considered income.
Interesting. Sure. Because it's not tangibly being deposited, but you're getting a benefit that you don't have to go buy your own car. So
exactly.
So yeah, that makes perfect sense.
It reduces your monthly net of what you need for monthly living expenses. Now in Florida, that need is what alimony is based on. So if one spouse is making $800,000 and one spouse is making $40,000, the courts do not look to equalize them. That's not how we do it. We look to what are the wife's expenses each month and how much does she need. So if her monthly expense is $10,000 a month and she's earning $50,000 a month, then she would need the difference, right? So, it could be, so if we do it in an annual way, say wife's earning $50,000 a year and the husband is earning $750,000 a year, but the wife's needs for the year are $120,000, then her need is $20,000 a year.
If he's making $750,000 and they're saving $200,000 a year for their retirement or other investment opportunities, is she not entitled to that continuation of savings versus just an expense of dinner out and a car and paying her mortgage?
I don't think so. No, I wouldn't think so. So, divorces aren't based on what could have been or should have been or would have been. It's based on need. What do you need? She doesn't need to save that kind of money every month. She was able to do it while they were married, but that's not a need. A need is, your basic needs, and somewhere in there comes a standard of living, okay? And, right, so if you can prove a certain standard of living and that she's entitled to continue to maintain that standard of living, and you can convince a judge that that amount of money per month that she was saving is part of her need, and the judge was in the, agreeing with you that day, perhaps you could win that argument. But if I was on the other side, I would not
give it up so easy.
Oh, no, I would not. Now, should she not get a facial, or should she not get her nails done, or should she stop getting her hair colored? No, that is her standard, however her standards were. But no, our courts do not look to equalize the parties after a divorce. It's based on need. And then, of course, the ability to pay. So even if a spouse has a need, if the other spouse does not have the ability to pay, you have heard the phrase, you cannot get blood from a stone.
Right. And again, this is Florida. This is Florida law. It's
I don't know any other
states.
law.
Right.
Right.
I'm just saying, again, we're just reiterating, somebody's joining us late. This is not a
It could-
national rule. This is how Florida is. So you mentioned, let's go real quick before we start running out of time. You mentioned the child custody and child support, where Florida ends at 18, you said, for child support, but let's say up north it might be 21.
Yes.
So what else, should people have children involved, what are some of maybe the things they need to know regarding the negotiations of custody, or is there any kind of guidelines along the side of that? Because my ex and I pretty much came up with an amicable splitting, out of a 14-day cycle. We each had 7 days, and they were intermittent: Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturdays. But, we balanced it out so that we each had 7 days out of 14. And as such, you take care of your expenses. Well, I'll take care of my expenses. And we didn't, this is in New Jersey, but we didn't pay each other any child support per se. We split all their education expenses. Our kids were bar mitzvahed. We split things, and that was, we mediated, obviously. We didn't have a cantankerous split. So we just pretty much my folks were divorced. All right. And I was 8. And this is back in the early 70s when divorce was really rare. And my mother was one of those, I'm going to get evens. And I grew up in a very hostile. You posted something on Facebook just the other day about the abuse and the emotional and the psychological abuse and being a pawn in a relationship as a child. Well, I was knight to rook 7. I was an ultimate pawn here. And so coming out of that, and my years of therapy from it.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to do that when my ex and I split. It was about the kids. My mother didn't put my brother and I first. My mother put, how can I get back at that dude? And I was just trampled on, right? So I don't want that. I didn't want that for my kids. So whatever it came down to, even if my ex and I weren't in agreement, at the end of the day, it was what's best for the kids, and that's what we executed. And that's how we got through it. And my kids are in their, pushing 30 and 31. But, it's a long time ago. But most of our friends that got divorced after us, fight after hostility and anger, and it was terrible.
In Florida, the number one priority of the courts is what's in the best interest of the children. And the court premise will start that each parent should see the children equal amount of times, that is what is in the children's best interest, although that may not always be the case. And some parents aren't able to do a 50-50 time split, and some parents they just don't get along no matter how much they try. So you're very lucky, and when we hang up, you should call your wife and thank her for being so great and being able to, negotiate. Yeah, I'm a divorce attorney and I did my own divorce, and I wish I could say that mine was as amicable as yours, but it wasn't. And it wasn't from my lack of trying. The truth is that there are so many different types of parenting plans that you can come up with that will work, but you should do what's in the best interest of your children. And my parents too were divorced when I was 9 years old. And so I am a child of divorce, which makes me a very good divorce attorney because I'm quite empathetic to what everyone is going through. And I was married for 10 years and now I'm divorced. So I also have personal experience as well. And I can tell you that any child of divorce knows who's playing dirty. Like you just said, your mother wanted to destroy your father and used you as pawns. Unfortunately, every single child, I don't care how old they are, will grow up and know exactly which parent did what and what they didn't do and who the good guy really was. And it will form not only your respect for that person as an adult in life, but it will definitely, hopefully, influence the way that you behave going through a similar situation.
And I'll interject on that, having been part of that and dealing with that and having friends that have dealt with it. And I'll give this kind of guidance is you may lose your kids in that relationship for a window of time emotionally because of the baggage that they're being fed. And that's going to be extremely painful and unfortunate. But I can assure you eventually the kids wake up out of that blind spot because they're young adults, they're teenagers, they don't have the capacity. And that one parent that's poisoning them is really manipulating the hell out of them. And that's what happened to me, is being manipulated. And so eventually your kid will get to an age where they're going to have the clarity and the aha.
And they're going to want to have a relationship with both parents regardless of who they were in this marriage. It doesn't really, you love your parents for their good, for their bad. My father had mental illness. I still loved him till the day he died. And I understood exactly why my mother divorced him, but I still loved him. He was my father. And that's how every kid feels. And so when you say something bad about that other person, you're scorching them for the rest. They will never, ever forget what you said, ever. And, or what you do. So, each person they answer to a higher, whoever that higher is, and you have to make choices based on, we all make choices based on our own experiences.
My mother never had a kind word to say about my father all those years. And my mother passed away at only the age of 45. I was 22. So I lost my mother at a pretty young age, and that venom stopped. And then my dad and I, who had our on and off windows of relationship during that time, because dealing with her and that state and then her illness, led to my dad and I being in a fractured relationship. And eventually, as her negative catalyst was removed from my life, I was able to make amends and patch things up and have that. And one of the things I said to him was, as much as she had all these negative things to say, I never heard you, let's say, retaliate, but he never had a disparaging word back, no matter what she said, no matter what she did. And I said, so basically he wasn't going tit for tat, right? And so his response to me was, and it sat with me, and I tried to do the same when I was going through the divorce. He said, She is still the mother of my children. She is giving you the primary care. I was with my mom 6 days a week and really only saw my dad for a half a day on a Saturday. He did not live nearby and his work schedule. So my mother was 6.5 days to his half. And so the last thing he was going to do was ever disparage her in our eyes, because that's really who we were living with. And so that sat with me and resonated, so that, again, the same thing when I went through my situation, and my kids were 5 and 7, we just got along, and it was never a knock or putting down that parent. I don't think we argued in front of the kids, nothing along those lines. And so, we were behaved and better mannered than what I grew up with. And the only way I got through that is because I experienced it and decided I don't want that. And unfortunately, I had to go through it to not do it. And so somebody who's never been through it might find themselves in the throes of this, get help. Physical violence, certainly not an answer, yelling, screaming, but how you behave in front of the kids.
It's great that you were able to break the chain, and you were able to observe, and know, you broke the chain, so sometimes you behave just like your parents, sometimes you marry your parents, and sometimes you break the chain. And so you were able to get divorced in a healthier way. And
I still got my issues. I still got issues.
No one is perfect. No one. Not even me. I'm not perfect either.
You're pretty close.
Aw, thanks. I try. I do try to, rise. That's I always think, can I handle this better? Can I raised 3 stepchildren, and they moved in with me when I got married, and they were 9 and 11 when I met their dad, and they lived with me till they left for college. And I had a lot of reasons to say pretty crappy things about their mom and never did. And, no matter what happened and no matter what they said, and even till this day, I will say, she's still your mom. Still your mom. And,
if anybody follows me on Facebook, you'll see I have the post. It doesn't cost you anything to be nice. It doesn't cost you anything to be nice. So there's no reason to knock people down, whether you agree with what they did. It's somebody else's parent or somebody else's child. It doesn't hurt you to be nice and just say, you know what, maybe she's not my cup of tea, and that's not the kind of mother I chose to be, and I want to do it this way. But you don't need to rub the kid's face in it, because it's not their fault. They didn't.
Right. It's not their fault. Yeah.
So I promised you 20 to 30 minutes. So congratulations. We've exceeded that. So good for you. See how easy that was. Not too bad. But let's any other points? I don't want to cut off. Anything else that you felt like you wanted to get out or convey to the audience?
I just, I think that if you are contemplating a divorce, you should speak to all your professionals, get a team, speak to a divorce attorney, create a guideline, speak to your accountant, speak to your insurance person, speak to people. Don't speak to your friends and your neighbors and your siblings. And not that you can't, but don't get advice from them. Get advice from professionals who can help you think with your head and not with your heart.
I heard this today at another meeting. Third party, unbiased conversation, because when you go to the family or friend, you're going to get judgmental overview, and you don't need or want that, because you're dealing with the emotions. So you need somebody who's not emotionally involved and can look at this from an absolute outside looking in perspective to say, you know what, Tammy, if this is my situation, this is what I would do here, 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 and here, and that's up to you. It's not, why would you do that? And you're crazy to leave him. And that's judgmental. Nobody needs that. We need a helping hand up. We need to get clarity on things, to think as logically and unemotionally as possible. And then if it's the right decision to move forward, you move forward. If you've kind of had second thoughts and maybe I can work this out, or there's some amicable way to go about it, well, then that's the guidance you were seeking, because a lot of people just don't know, right? They really don't know what they're walking into. And it may be way easier than they thought. It may be much more challenging than they thought, but at least they understand, if I'm going to launch, it's going to be this.
There's a really good workshop that will educate the public, and it's called Second Saturday. And it's spelled out, second, the word second, and then Saturday.com. And you can then go by state. So if you're in New York, New Jersey, Florida, wherever you are in the country, you can click on the state, and it will tell you where the workshop is being held, whether it's on Zoom or in person. And it will educate you on the legal, emotional, and financial impact of divorce. And so at least you'll have some knowledge. And it'll give you a very good basic overview in your state, how the law works and what you can do for yourself emotionally and financially to protect yourself. And it doesn't matter whether you're a male or a female. It's a really good educational workshop. And I do it on the second Saturday, Bruce, of every month. And you can go to my website, secondsaturdaybocaraton.com, and sign up for it and see what it's all about.
Oh, awesome. All right. So we're going to put that in our box. So everybody who is listening or watching when you get this podcast or YouTube version, we're going to put all Tammy's contact information in there. And it's Second Saturday, SECONDSATURDAY. I hope I got that right. .com. And then your particular version is Second Saturday Boca Raton.
Right.
BOCARATON.
Yeah, you can also find me on the main website under Florida, and then there's several locations in Florida, and I'm in Boca Raton.
Okay. And TBS Law?
TBS Law, PA, that's me.
TBS Law, PA in Boca Raton. So, Tammy, I just want to thank you so much. I hope the audience got some great value. I know I did, and I appreciate you having on here. Remember, everybody, like, share, subscribe. Hit us up at asktheplanman.com. Text the word Planman to our number there, 321-421-5213. Check the box below. I'm supposed to point below. There'll be a below. And you'll have all Tammy's contact information and Ask the Planman's information. Once again, Tammy Saltzman, Boca Raton, Florida, matrimonial and real estate law for all your needs. If you have something in South Florida, please reach out to us or Tammy. And thank you, Tammy, for being here. Remember, don't hang up. And we'll see everybody soon at Ask the Planman. Take care now. Thanks for joining us.
Bye-bye.
When you need some advice, never sacrifice, always get it right. Ask the Planman. Finance, insurance, and more.